Thank you, board members. So today I'm here to present our benchmark assessment data. So this will show how we're doing with student achievement so far this year from fall to winter. So you'll get a nice overview of everything that we've been working on so far with our data. This falls in nicely with our continuous improvement process. Some of you heard of MyKIP, our Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement Process, which is our new district improvement through MDE, the Michigan Department of Education. So this falls in nicely where we can see how kids were doing in the fall when they first arrived back at school within the first few weeks, and then how we're doing as of winter with our next round of testing. We just collected and pulled in that data to pull together for you. So it fits in nicely with that. And then this is something that we do every year, just so you know, especially new board members. But this falls in line too with our School Aid Act Section 98B, where we're going through a continuous improvement process where we look at our fall data and see how we're doing, we look at our winter, and we make adjustments based on what we're seeing with students now. So it falls in nicely with the law as well as our continuous improvement, like I said. And so you'll get another report in June before we leave for summer so we can see how kids did across our school year and what our next steps are as we look to summer plans and what we're gonna do to help kids as they come back the next fall. So that's why we're here tonight, so thank you. As you see on your screen too, you'll see there's two specific assessments that I'm going to talk about tonight. The first is our FastBridge, that's our adaptive computer assessment, and I'll explain that further in a second. And then I'm also going to take a little bit of time to talk about our Fountas and Pinnell literacy assessment that our teachers use as well. Oops, and it jumped ahead, so give me 1 second. There we go, okay. So a little bit about FastBridge. So each of our schools, K through 9, so even 9th grade at the high school, we give this assessment in literacy and math 3 times a year, so fall, winter, and spring. It is computer adaptive, which means that as students are taking this assessment, the questions get harder and more difficult to kind of see where a child is in relation to standards. It is a short enough test that it's not all the standards. There's no way a test could possibly test all the standards there are in a grade level, but it's a nice sampling so we can kind of see how are our kids progressing. It's a screener to also identify who might need support, who might benefit from support. And again, it's just one data point, and we want our teachers looking at multiple data points across the year, not just one. But what's great about this, as I said, it's adaptive. It's our universal screener so we can see who needs support. We do this with all students, even students with IEPs. And it helps us evaluate where their current skills are right now in the moment. It helps us start to predict future achievement and then assess their learning growth so far in the year. Are they keeping on track with their peers? They're designed to be quick and efficient and valid and reliable as well so that we can make decisions at a grade level, a department level, building level, and district level. And to see if there's any specific skills that we might need to shore up with a particular student. It does give us a menu of things that a student might need to work on. Again, it assesses in reading and math. As I was reminding you too, our students are not defined by one score or label. We want to look at multiple data points, and today you're just seeing that one data point and how we're doing. Keep in mind when we sit down and meet with teachers, we're looking at multiple data points to see how a child is doing. Obviously, we want to help our students grow across our year. And then the great other thing about FastBridge is that it offers family reports to show how a student is doing over time, and then it shows how the student is doing in comparison to other students in our district and how our students are doing compared to other students across the nation. And so you'll get just an overview of our district with that information. So that's just a little bit about FastBridge. Our former assessment was NWEA, just so you know, and we've been using FastBridge for about 3 years now. The other assessment we are going to talk about tonight is Fountas and Pinnell. That's our literacy assessment. And a little bit about that. That is where a teacher in a classroom, and this is K through 5, just so you know, so this is elementary specific. A teacher sits one-on-one with a student right next to them. The teacher will select a fiction or a nonfiction text. They try to alternate to make sure that kids are going with lots of different types of text and not just fiction, for example. As they're sitting one-on-one with that student, right next to the child, and the child is reading the text and looking at the pictures, the teacher's recording all kinds of information on a sheet. They're looking at how are they decoding words and their word accuracy. They're looking at their fluency and how they're phrasing and chunking their words together as they read. They're looking at, are they paying attention to the punctuation as they read, which influences how you pronounce things as you go through a story. And then at the end, they're looking to see how long it took the child to read that story. And then they're also having a comprehension conversation about the book that they just read or the text. And the teacher will determine, oh my gosh, this child did great, they're independent, I'm gonna make sure they have lots of level books at this level because they can pretty much read them on their own and do fabulously. Or they might say, okay, I'm gonna take this child another level higher. They'll do that same assessment again and decide, okay, I might have some teaching points with this child. There's some things that they're missing or they're not decoding something correctly, and they'll decide, okay, so that's my next teaching steps for this student. This is an instructional level for them. That's where they might see across their classroom, there's a small group of students that are in that similar reading level, and they'll pull them for small group instruction based on the skills that they need help with in their reading. So it's very connected and student-driven based on what the teacher is observing and recording from that student reading a text. So it's one of our great assessments that I love. Tells you everything you need to know about a child's reading. I wanted to show this a little bit just to talk about our district, and we really believe in a balanced assessment system. As I was mentioning, not just looking at one assessment. So this comes from MAC, which is the Michigan Assessment Consortium, and they really talk to districts about having a balanced assessment system across your district. That yes, you might be at that tiny top level looking at national data, but it doesn't drive instruction, and then you have your state level assessment data that tells you how you're doing compared to other kids across the state. Our district assessment, which is where we're at today, which is our benchmark data to see, okay, overall, how are we performing as a district? How are we doing? How are our kids performing? And then we have the next level, which is classroom-based assessments, and then you see the bulk of our assessment work is formative assessment, which is driven daily in the classroom. They're just simple, quick assessments that teachers give to see, okay, here's our learning target for the day. Today in reading, we're gonna study how to summarize a short piece of text. So the kids know what the learning target is, and then the teacher will ask questions and observe the student to see, okay, how are they doing with summarizing text? They might even have a rubric. The students might even help develop that rubric, and then they can see how are they performing and where do they need to bump up next to. So it guides instruction, and it's literally for the students. Like, that's the purpose of formative assessment. Just to give you a quick sampling of what it is. But you can see that's the bulk of the work, and again, today you can see where benchmark assessment data kind of fits in, looking at all types of assessment. So I wanted to share that with you. Next up, it's the whole idea that, when we're looking at data, that this is all for our students. It's that feedback and communication on how they're doing. It's setting those learning targets. It's helping students with goal setting, and then using our assessment data to drive that instruction to support our students the best that we can, and then doing that alongside our families. So this is all about our students. So next we're going to dive into our district overview. How are we doing? So this particular graph that you see in front of you comes straight from Fastbridge. Of course, I tweaked it, made it our own. But what this is showing you is the percent of students that are on track. So in Fastbridge, when the student takes the adaptive math assessment, for each grade level, fall and winter, they set a benchmark score. So let's say, for example, in the fall for 4th grade, the benchmark kids were supposed to be at 210, right? And then in the winter, the kids are supposed to be at 215. So the benchmark increases with each window, that they have to hit a higher benchmark. And we know that the questions get harder. But what this graph is really showing you when you look at the purple sections, the low risk and the on track, those are the kids that are meeting the benchmark expectation for that time of year. So we can see from this in the fall, we had 84% of our students hitting the grade level benchmark, and this is the average of all the grades. And then for winter, it was 82%. In terms of one of the things in the state we use is multiple tiered systems of support, right? And what the state says is that your core curriculum and content and teaching, what teachers do in the classroom, should be meeting the needs of 80% of your students, right? And then they say 15% of students, right, might need a little bit of extra support. It doesn't mean they're not on grade level, but they need some support with either the standards or specific skills to stay on grade level and keep track with their peers. So we provide what we call Tier 2 interventions to support those kids. This helps us identify who those kids might be, right? So the lighter pink that you see when you see like 14% for winter, those are kids that we're looking at alongside some other data to say, okay, this child may need some extra support in math. Let's look at what our FastBridge report says and see what skills we might need to shore up with that student. Or vice versa, teachers also using that data to say, no, based on our classroom assessments with Envision Math or Big Ideas Math, I'm not seeing it. This kid is doing great with these standards. So teachers have some decisions to make based on the student data they're seeing. On this one-day screener, it's just telling us that 14% of our students might need support. We have to take our reports and look and see, does that student or that group of students really need something more, right? And so the teacher will make decisions alongside the learning specialists and the interventionists in the building. So they do data digs throughout the year as well. And then that 4% that you see, those are the students that, according to FastBridge, on this sampling of standards, they're saying they need some intensive love and support to stay caught up with their peers. It doesn't mean they're not at grade level, doesn't mean they didn't make growth from fall to winter, it's just saying that's the percent of students that hit the benchmark for that grade level for this time of year. So that's math, so it is great to see, it is exciting to see that over 80% of our students are at benchmark across our district. So that's a good thing to see in terms of MTSS. We're right where we should be in terms of what the state says. Multiple tiered systems of support, just in case I slip into using acronyms. For reading, what we're seeing from the fall, again, same thing as math. We're just trying to see the percentage of students that are at benchmark for this time of year. So that's both the purple section, so that's 80% in the fall, and then 80% in the winter. And keep in mind, that's hitting a higher benchmark, right, for this time of year. So if in literacy and math in 4th grade, the kids were supposed to be at 450, now they're supposed to be at 455, we still have 80% hitting that benchmark. So we're doing good in terms of our tiers of support and meeting most of our student needs. Okay, what's different about this graph, the purples and pinks, now we have red, yellow, golden color, and some green and teal. So let me explain what this is different. So I know that you like to know, how are we doing against the nation? So that's what this graph is about. So this is AMath, the adaptive math test for K-9. And what the difference is here is this is a percentile ranking, not a percent proficient, not a percent of material covered. This is like if we were to take the students, like 100 students, and we were line them up from the lowest score to the highest score. And a kid was at the 50th percentile, that means that they did 50% better than their peers across the nation. And so what we're seeing here, right, when you think about the old bell curve, how many of you learned about that in school, the bell curve? We're like 25% to 75% along that bell curve, and obviously 50% was at the top of the bell, right, was dead average. I mean, in a typical classroom, right, you would see that 25th to 75th, that some kids are low average, some kids are dead average, and some kids are high average. Right, and then you've got the above average, beyond the 75%, and then the below average, below the 25%. FastBridge has a higher expectation, so they make their cuts at the 30th percentile and the 85th. And so what this is telling you is that in math, 33% of our students in this district are at that 85th percentile or higher, if we were to rank order our students against kids in the nation. 56% are in that average range, like low to high average. And then what I also put in there for you is, okay, where exactly, because that 30th to 85th is like a long range of kids in the average in a classroom, I put where the 50th percentile would be. And so what that's telling you is that, right, we have 5731s, we have like 88% of our students are either average or high average across our district. That's a huge chunk of our kids, right? But it's telling you that 72% are at the 50th percentile and above, right? So that's a huge number of our kids. And then about 14% are just below dead average, but they're still in the average range. When we see the yellow, that golden color, right, 4 to 5% of our students are in that 20th to 29th percentile, which means those students might need some support. We have to look at other data points. And then obviously the 0 to 19th percentile, those are kids that need a lot of intensive love and support to stay caught up with peers across the nation. And so we're providing those interventions for students. So that's math, but I wanted to explain what the difference is between a percentile, right? It's ranking, versus a percentage, right? So we're not talking here about 30% proficient. We're talking about the idea that kids at the 30th percentile are doing 30% better than other students in the nation. So again, that's a huge chunk of our kids. And then you'll see the same thing for a reading, right? Our adaptive reading test. We're seeing similar trends to math, right? Where we have like well over 88% of our students that are in the average to high average range, and then 72% of our students are at the 50th percentile or higher. Okay. And it's similar from fall to winter as well, that we're maintaining that percentage of students at that percentile. I'm going to switch gears for just a second. So that's a little just overview of FastBridge, reading and math. I'm going to switch gears to Fountas and Pinnell, again, which is that one-on-one literacy assessment that a teacher does with a student. The reason why in the fall it says 1st through 5th grade, and then in the winter it says K through 5, it's because in kindergarten, not all of our students come in reading. So it's hard to give them a reading test if, you know, kids coming into kindergarten, some of them are still learning to recognize their name in print. Some of them are still learning their letters and sounds. They don't know them all. And so we have some other teacher-level assessments we give called the Michigan Literacy Progress Profile, where it will test a student on just their letter identification or their sound recognition. It will test phonemic awareness, which is where, like, in like preschool or before kindergarten or even into kindergarten, the phonemic awareness is what you hear. And so, for example, we're testing kids on, like if I say to you, bat, what's the beginning sound in bat? And the kids have to say, ba. So we're just listening auditorily to see what they do. We're looking to see if they can rhyme. Or we're looking to see if the kids give us a word, like kind of the opposite, right, effect, not just identify it, but what do they hear, and it's not in print. It might be the beginning sound and the ending chunk. So if I say b-at, like you're just giving the sounds, the kid has to put the word together to say that's bat, right? So they're having an auditory understanding of what they're doing with sounds. That's what phonemic awareness is. So a lot of our kids in kindergarten are coming in, and we're helping them with that phonemic awareness before we're trying to do phonics as well, which is what's in print with sounds. That makes sense. So a lot of rhyming, a lot of alliteration, those kinds of things that we're doing with kids. So it's really hard. The kids that are reading, we do give the Fountas and Pinnell if they're ready to read. But then we know as kids progress throughout the year, more and more of our kids are beginning to read in kindergarten, and so winter's a nice time where we start doing that Fountas and Pinnell, the reading assessment. Like, can they read? No, no, no. Can they read? Yes, yes, yes. Do they know some simple sight words? And so we're looking at those kinds of things. So that's what this test is. So the reason why, again, why kindergarten isn't to the winter, it's because a lot of our kids don't come in reading in kindergarten, very, very few. But what this shows is that at least 1st through 5th grade, we had, if we look at the blue and the green, the blue is meeting expectations. That means based on state and Fountas and Pinnell recommendations, which is research-based, our kids at a reading level where they're supposed to be for that grade level at that time of year. And throughout each testing session, the meeting expectations, the level a child is supposed to read at, increases throughout the year, right? So every trimester, they're expected to read at higher reading levels, right? And that's what the teachers are assessing. Are they getting better at reading? Are they improving their reading level? So what this is saying is that 81% of our students at the fall were already meeting expectations or exceeding expectations for the grade level for that time of year. And then in the winter, again, if we look at the green and the blue, and now this includes kindergarten, what we're seeing is that 85% of our students are reading at grade level or above. You can see a huge chunk are exceeding what Fountas and Pinnell says is the expectation for winter. The nice thing about this is we see that from fall to winter is that the number of students not meeting expectation lowered, so that means they moved up in reading levels, and then obviously you can see approaching expectations changed a little bit, and then obviously we increased the number of students meeting and exceeding expectations from fall to winter. So that's Fountas and Pinnell, and so now we're going to look more at some disaggregated data. So this is by grade level. So for math, we have kindergarten through 9th grade. And earlier I just gave you like the overall, the average of all the grade levels together. And so what this shows is that kindergarten, 9th grade, 2nd, 3rd, 7th, pretty much, well, kindergarten through 9th grade shows that 2nd, 3rd, 7th grade maintained the percent of students at benchmark from fall to winter. Kindergarten, 1st, 5th, 6th, and 9th show just a slight decrease in the percent of students at benchmark, and 4th and 8th grades show a slight increase. Just keeping in mind that at each window, the benchmark increases. And we're not seeing huge drops. And obviously, when we do see something, it's usually just a shift in a few kids that's causing that. And again, we're looking at all of the data by teacher, by grade level, to see what we need to do to support students. So that is math. And then for reading, with regard to the literacy scores, we still see that most are between 71 to 82% of our students are meeting the benchmark in the winter. And then just a reminder that the scores increase each testing season. We can see that 4th grade shows a slight increase, so does 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 6th grade. 5th grade rate remained about the same, and then there's slight drops in 1st, 7th, 8th, and 9th. And again, we're working to identify those to see, where kids need help. But it just gives you the overall breakdown by grade level from fall to winter. And again, this is the percent of students meeting the benchmark. It's purple because we're the Blackhawks, so that's why it's purple. This is more of our disaggregated data. So this is A math, and this is the breakdown by group. So you can see all students in here, our district average that you saw earlier, 84% in the fall, 82% in the winter are meeting the benchmark. And then you can see how we're doing for all grade level groups. While the percentage of students meeting the increasing benchmark is good, it's important to see each group individually. The percentage of students at benchmark or above and students, with IEPs, our white group, our Asian group remains similar from fall to winter. The Latinx group shows a slight increase. The ELL, the English language learners group, Black African American, students experiencing poverty see some decreases from fall to winter. The difference in the percent of students at benchmark is a drop. Also, I just wanted to point this out because I was looking at some of the data. It's actually a difference in the number of students tested. Like I was specifically looking at our Black African American and trying to understand why we went from 65 to 59, for example. I'm sorry. 55 to 48, sorry. I have to look at the groups. And what I'm noticing, it's such a small number of students in our district that tested that even just a few students in one grade level, for example, 5th grade I was looking at, there was a drop in like 3 to 4%, and the reason why, it's literally because of 3 students. We had 3 less students test, and all 3 happened to be on track, and those students didn't test in the winter. I don't know if they moved out of district or what, and so that caused the drop. So it wasn't something we were doing, it was a drop in the number of students that actually tested that were on track. So like if we had 53 students in 4th grade test, or 5th grade that I was looking at, what did I say, 53, then we had 50 tests in the winter. And those happened to be kids that were on track, so it dropped, right? So that's part of why we have data digs, at buildings and in grade level teams, so we can get to the why, so we know what to do about it. But I just wanted to explain that I've been looking at some of that. I also know, in particular, when I look at that group, I was trying to see, like, of that group, how many might be students experiencing poverty, or how many might be students with IEPs. And when I looked at the breakdown of the African American group in Black African American in 5th grade, I was noticing that 1/3 of them have IEPs. So they're getting the most intensive support possible, but want to, dig in with buildings, and that's part of our next steps that I'll talk about later is, okay, what else can we do, right, to support our students? So just some examples and the idea that we dig into the why. So that's math. And then if we take a look at literacy, literacy seems to be pretty stable from fall to winter. Like we're seeing, like, not the drops that we saw in math for certain groups. Our district average was 80% in the fall. It's 80% in the winter. That's overall, and then we can see each individual group. Trying to see what else I wanted to point out. right? The English language learner group saw an increase in the percent at benchmark. Obviously, we're using FastBridge to identify those additional children that need continued supports. And then our students with IEPs, obviously we're seeing like from 42 to 41% at benchmark. But again, those are the students getting the highest level. When we look at tiers of support, like our multiple tiered systems of support model, that level 3 or student IEP, they're really getting the most support possible. So we got to continue working with our students and our teachers. This next section is really going to get down to the building level. So we did a wide district overview. We got down to the disaggregated data, and now we're getting into some building level data. I did want to bring up Wing Lake. I know that they do not use Fountas and Pinnell or FastBridge. They have their own assessments. Wing Lake is our center program. We get students from all over the county, and they support students with IEPs that have severe, like multiple physical challenges or severe cognitive needs. And so they're getting a lot of support at Wing Lake, and it's important that we not just look at our general education data, but also dig deeper into our students with IEPs as well, because they are part of our district. And we're here to support all kids. Wing Lake for math, hold on, I wrote it down. They use, from the Macomb ISD, they have a math assessment from there, and that's what they use. Rebecca Anders asked that I really point out to you that this is a 2-year average. I know last year they were experiencing a lot of students who were sick, and they are more susceptible to getting ill. And now this year, with more consistent instruction, kids are not as ill as much as they were last year or out of school, or teachers, that they're actually seeing from like last fall to now an increase in that assessment. It asks about 10 questions that are appropriate for students with IEPs at that level to see if they're making any gains with their learning. And so they're tracking that progress over there and really trying to support their students as well. And then the same trend with reading, where we're seeing some just over time, at least some increases. That particular assessment is called the Bridges Literacy Assessment, and it's used at other centers comparable to Wing Lake across our state, a similar assessment as well. And so we can see from the fall of last year, they went from 5.3 on average, that was the point scored on their assessment, to 5.59 this past winter. So wanted to share that with you as well. This one, so I have every single building, but I'm just going to specifically talk about Conant because they're first. What you see here is the top left graph indicates the students that were at benchmark, at the benchmark expectation with FastBridge for the fall and the winter. So you can see at Conant, we had 84% of students with math at the benchmark in the fall, and in the winter we have 83%. Then with reading, which is the lower left-hand corner, in the fall they had 79% of students at benchmark, and then 81% in the winter. The graphs on the right are for the Fountas and Pinnell that I was talking about, that one-on-one reading assessment. Again, grades 1 through 4 in the fall, and in the winter, as kids begin reading, we add in kindergarten. We can see that, let's see, I'm gonna check my notes real quick. We had about 83% of students meeting the expectation for Fountas and Pinnell in the fall, and the winter data shows us that about 88% of students are meeting the expectation for winter in grades K through 4 at that building. Sorry, just checking my notes, but I did talk about the assessment, so that's good. And sorry, just checking to see if there's anything else I wanted to share, but that's good. So what you have before you, right, is just the FastBridge and then the Fountas and Pinnell scores for fall and winter. And then as you move through your deck, you'll see the same thing provided for you for every single building. So I'm not going to go over every single building, but you have that before you so you can see how each building is doing. Keep in mind that, you know, when you look at the middle schools, their data will be for their particular grade levels. So FastBridge, again, is given K-9. So West Hills has grades 4 through 8, so that's what their data represents. And then for Fountas and Pinnell, which is the reading assessment, I mentioned to you earlier that it only goes K-5. So I pointed out to you that's for 4th and 5th because that's what West Hills has. So just pay attention to the grade levels at the middle schools. And then the high school, remember, they don't take Fountas and Pinnell because it only goes up to grade 5, so this is just 9th grade. So you can see how our 9th graders did at the high school with FastBridge, reading, and math. I think this is important additional data. I know it's not part of our benchmark data, but just every year when we give MSTEP as part of the 3rd grade reading law, we have to look at the students that are proficient with the 3rd grade reading assessment, the ELA assessment. And if students are not proficient, if they're below proficiency or not proficient, we are asked by the state to potentially retain those kids because of their MSTEP score, their MSTEP proficiency. I wanted to let you know that we did not have any students recommended for retention. Okay, so that's basically what this is telling you. 97% of our students met the expectation on MSTEP this past spring. We had 2.5 that were just recommended for additional support, so we're making sure we provide supports to those students. And then I know it says less than 1%, but we didn't have anybody that would be 0 recommended for retention. So it's just additional data to have. So what are some key takeaways from today? So, I mean, essentially, when we look at our overall district average, we have 80% of or more of our students that are at least at benchmark. It should say for the middle of the year, not the end of the year, so ignore that. I will fix it. Keep in mind, as we look towards June, we know that there's going to be another higher expectation than there was this winter because the score benchmark increases. Our testing window just closed right at the end of January, just as teachers were also trying to finish final exams, report cards, things like that. We just finished compiling all of the data. We actually need time for all of our building teams to go back and review it. Our school improvement teams had a little bit of a preview of their data as they were pulling it because we were getting ready for our MyKit meeting around continuous improvement. But they actually need time to dig back with their building teams to really dig into the data to see what are our next steps and look at strategies that you're using across grade levels, departments, or at that site. And obviously with our teacher teams, our administrators, our coaches, English language development teachers, resource room teachers, they're all working together to analyze their data and understand each child's story, because there's always a story behind a student and what they're dealing with so that we can support them. Sometimes it might also be a social emotional need and not just an academic skill, and sometimes we have to piece those together to support a student. Obviously, as you can see, we have a high percentage of students, of all students meeting the benchmark, but we know there's still much work to do to close the opportunity gap for some of our students, student populations. But we are seeing successful results in terms of like MTSS, which is an expectation from MDE that we're implementing, looking at our data, using data study teams, and then providing supports to children at all tiers. So those are some key takeaways, some of the next steps. One of the things I'm working on in relation to the law, along with our whole learning services team and all of our administrators across the district and school improvement teams, is we create a continuous improvement report where it outlines literally everything that we're working on, all of the building strategies where they get into detail once they've looked at their data, and then it has all of their data. So it'll have their MSTEP data for the last 5 years. It will have their FastBridge, so you can see like 3 years over time how we've been doing with this particular assessment. And then it's also broken down by group, so it's disaggregated. So you can see that for 3 years. So they have their strategies along with all of their data for literacy and math so that everybody can see it. It is made public, so it does go on our transparency dashboard. So that will be made public. This particular report will be made public on Tuesday on our dashboard so that everyone will be able to see it. And you can see what we're working on and then continuing to make strides towards June to support all of our students. Also, as part of the law, and we get this guidance from MESA, which is the Michigan Association of Intermediate School Administrators, but as part of the School Aid Act 98B, which I was presenting on, we also have a report that we fill out for the state, and that's also made public, so that will also go on our dashboard as well. And you will see actually matrix tables where it breaks down every single building by demographic, so you'll get further down into the data as well, so that will be made available to everyone. And again, by Tuesday, because we have until the end of the month. Some of the other things that we're working on, I just tried to highlight for you, right? I was mentioning that building teams need time to review. Our learning services team needs time to actually review with those building teams to see what they're working on, because it helps us think about where do we need more resources, where might we need more support, And then it also helps inform our MyKit process and what we're doing with our overall district strategies. We want our strategies to come from what our students need, right? It should be student-driven, student data-driven on where we can do better. So we need time to look at all of that. And then obviously we have a district multiple tiered systems of support. Part of the MDE process is that we have a team that works together to help align our buildings and what we're doing to support kids. So our leadership team across the district needs time to look at the data and what we're doing. And as always, we're going to continue to progress monitor all of our students and continue to support them the best way that we can. Okay. So that's the gist. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.